He welcomed his 94th birthday in absolute silence. No guests, no calls, no family, no neighbors, no friends. Just the soft hum of an old refrigerator and a white ceiling. He looked at that morning, the same way he had for the past 34,365 mornings. And in that silence came a full realization. He was alone. Completely. And the most surprising thing, there was no tragedy in that silence, no complaints. He wasn't suffering. He was living, alone, without help, without self-pity, without whining. And he didn't end up there by accident. He prepared himself. He built his own old age, brick by brick, because he knew no one was coming to save him. This video isn't about suffering. It's about choice, because he didn't survive. Thanks to someone else, he survived. Because one day he told himself, if I don't take care of this now, it'll be too late later. Listen, carefully. 94 years old, alone, and living. Not just getting by. Now, let's be honest. How many people, once they hit 70, start saying things like, I just want to make it peacefully. To 80, after that, whatever happens, happens. That sentence sounds like surrender, like giving up on yourself, and you don't even notice how that thought starts to grow inside you, slowly, quietly. You stop taking care of yourself, stop going outside, start blaming every ache on old age, and, almost without realizing it, you stop living. He didn't let that happen. He said, every day I asked myself one question. Am I slowly dying just because I decided not to change anything? Scary? Good. Because fear is a signal that time is moving, and you're standing still. Now picture this scene. You wake up and you can't move your arm. High blood pressure. A stroke. Or maybe your body just said enough. You try to call for help, but no one's there. The phone's out of reach. No sound from the neighbor's apartment. No one is coming. Not because you're a bad person, but because you didn't prepare. Do you get it? Old age isn't just a number. It's a situation. It's you and your environment. And if you think your kids, grandkids, or neighbors will definitely be there for you, think again. Look at the data. Over 70% of seniors aged 70 plus in the U.S. experience chronic loneliness. And that number grows every year. That's not an accident. It's the result of inaction, wishful thinking, and constant procrastination. How many people you know say, I don't want to be a burden to my kids? And yet, they become one. Why? Because they didn't take action while they still could. Because they never asked the most important question. If not me, then who's going to take care of me? This man, he made a choice. He didn't wait. He created a system where survival wasn't a struggle. It was a structure. Yes, it took strength. Yes, he made tough decisions. But that's exactly why he reached 94. Alone and unbroken. When I asked him what he feared most, he didn't hesitate. Becoming a burden to anyone, being helpless. That's why I did these 3 things. What are those 3 things? We'll break them down. One by one. But remember, he wasn't special. He just thought about it before it was too late, and the first reason for his longevity, it wasn't a pill or a doctor or a diet. It's something anyone can have, but almost no one holds on to in old age, and that's what we'll talk about. In the next part, he said it without drama, without emotion, just plain, like a diagnosis. Discipline is not willpower, it's a survival instinct. And at that moment, I realized he wasn't the iron old man. people made him out to be. He was an ordinary person who made one extraordinary choice: to stop hoping for tomorrow, to stop waiting for things to get easier, and to just act every day. While others complained about being tired, he got up at exactly 6:30. While neighbors complained about the weather, he went outside, even in the rain. While some waited for inspiration to stretch, he was already finishing his morning exercises. He didn't consider it heroic. He didn't call it a feat. He said, "If I don't move today, tomorrow I won't be able to. That's it. It's just math." Do you want to hear something nice? That it all depends on your mood? That if you're tired, you can rest? He'd look you in the eye and say, "Sure, rest. Just don't complain later when you're lying in a hospital bed." Now let's be honest. When was the last time you got up with your alarm? Not because you had an appointment, but simply because you promised yourself you'd live with precision and purpose? When did you look at a bottle of pills and say, "No, I'll start with breathing exercises. I'll take a step toward life"? You can't remember, because you keep putting it off. But in old age, every day you postpone, you lose a function, lose movement, lose memory. And that's the real tragedy. In old age, a person doesn't just age. They lose freedom. The freedom to choose when to wake up, where to go, what to eat, who to talk to. And the only way to keep even a shred of that freedom is discipline. He didn't have a caregiver, no schedule on the fridge made by his kids. He was his own staff, his own doctor, his own coach. His day was scheduled down to the minute. Not because he was a control freak, but because he understood. Chaos is aging's best ally. Breakfast at 7 o'clock a.m., walk at 8 o'clock a.m., joint exercises at 9 o'clock a.m., kitchen cleaning at 10 o'clock a.m., reading at 11 o'clock a.m., and so on, every day. He used to laugh. "If I don't mop the floor myself, someone will be mopping it under me in a nursing home soon. I don't want anyone cleaning up after me. This is my home, my body, and my responsibility." That's the key. Don't wait for motivation. Act without it, because motivation is fickle. But discipline is like an immune system. You either train it or you lose it. Still want to believe there's time? That I'll take care of myself when I retire? Then visit your nearest hospital. Look at those who didn't make it in time. They all wanted to, they all hoped, but their bodies no longer listen. And the nurses who care for them all say the same thing. If only he'd started earlier, if only he'd tried, even a little, everything could have been different. Discipline isn't harshness, it's care. It's not about being strict with yourself. It's about not wanting to disappear. And that's just the first reason for his longevity, but that alone gave him decades of life. In the next part, you'll learn what he removed from his life in order to live nearly a century, without pain, without fear, and without depending on anyone. He was 63. An age. When most people start clinging to any contact just to avoid being alone. But he did the exact opposite. He intentionally cut ties with anyone who was dragging him down, and did it without regret. These weren't random acquaintances, they were family, a sister who every evening told him which neighbor died this winter, a cousin who only called to complain about his blood pressure, his pension, and the pointlessness of old age, a neighbor who repeated daily, "You know, it's all behind you now." He was tired, not of them, but of the feeling that these conversations were slowly killing him. One day I hung up the phone and realized I could barely breathe. It felt like my lungs were full of cement. He didn't avoid loneliness. He chose conscious silence. And it wasn't withdrawal from the world. It was healing. He understood. An aging brain is like an open wound. It's vulnerable, and every emotional blow could be the last. That's why he started protecting himself, firmly, without compromise. Now let me ask you, how many of these blows do you take each day? You turn on the news in the morning, and a storm of catastrophes, death, and threats hits your ears. You talk to people your age, and all they discuss is who got sick, who died, who's now a vegetable. You scroll through social media, and it's the same chronicle of fear. Now listen closely. Harvard Medical School has proven that a chronic negative emotional background accelerates cellular aging by 15 to 20%. That means you're speeding up the end just by letting other people's fear live in your mind. He said no to that. He didn't reject people. He rejected emotional and informational poison. He started choosing his environment as carefully as he chose groceries. If someone carried weight, fear, or despair, they weren't allowed into his day. I couldn't afford other people's pain. I already had enough responsibility for my body, my mind, and every tomorrow. His circle, after 70, looked different. Short, uplifting conversations with his grandkids, books, walks among trees, jazz and classical music on the radio, and silence, but not silence as emptiness, silence as recovery. Every complaint is like rust. It eats away at you quietly, and one day you just fall apart. Are you afraid of being alone? That's normal, but you should fear a different kind of loneliness, the kind that happens surrounded by people who make you weaker. Being in a room with family who spread panic is scarier than sipping tea alone in silence where you can heal. This isn't cruelty, it's mental hygiene. You brush your teeth. Every day, right? When was the last time you brushed your social circle? He put up a filter. Simple, radical, but it gave him years. You either breathe or you swallow other people's fear, he said. And he lived. 3 more decades, with clarity, vitality, and most importantly, with choice. In the next part, you'll learn why meaning isn't a luxury, but a tool for survival, and how he stayed on his feet, even when everyone around him had already given up. When he handed me that old, scratched notebook, I thought it was a diary, maybe a collection of memories or a list of medications. But no, on the first page, neat, small, almost school-like handwriting. Title, Goals for my 80th year of life. Stop for a second. Goals. At 80 years old, not wishes, not dreams, goals, clear, planned, looking toward the future, not the past. He looked at me and said, "The body dies faster when the mind loses purpose. People don't die of old age. They die when they don't know why they should get out of bed." And there it was, the third reason for his longevity, the one no one likes to talk about. Purpose. Hard, tangible, personal. Not philosophy, not abstraction, not "I just want to be happy," but plant 6 new strawberry bushes this spring. Learn how to use a new tablet. Read 10 pages a day. Write a letter to my daughter, even if she doesn't reply. He didn't live in yesterday. He didn't dwell on, "It was better back then." He lived through projects, tasks, questions. He said, "Old people don't die from illness. They die from emptiness, from not knowing why they should live another day." When was the last time you planned something more than a week ahead? When was the last time you forced your brain to work not out of habit, but because you wanted to do something? If you're thinking about that right now, it's a red flag, because that's where it all begins, or ends. In nursing homes around the world, doctors say the same thing. When a person stops expecting something, they start dying. Not instantly, not that day, but like a candle whose wick has burned down. Now imagine 2 80-year-olds. One watches the news, complains, and reminisces about how things were under Nixon. The other builds model airplanes, studies Italian, and records podcasts. Both are old. Both have their years, but one is alive, and the other is already gone. He lived to 94, and for the last 14 years he didn't just count the days. He filled them, not for fame, not for money, for himself, because he refused to fade away while still breathing. And you need to ask yourself right now, do you have a reason to live, or are you just waiting? Here are the 3 reasons he made it to 94. Discipline. Emotional hygiene. Purpose. Do you want to live to 94, or just last that long? The decision is yours. But time is no longer on your side. There's no more waiting. Time's up.